Hi everyone, it's Lisa Mears. Welcome back, and if you're new here today, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using some products from Pretty Pink Posh. The products that I'm going to be using are some stencils and a die set and a stamp set. Here's a look at one of the stencils. This is a 3-layer stencil. It is called Layered Spring Flowers. And when you color this up with your inks, it just gives you some beautiful flowers that you can use for a background on your card. So I will be working with this stencil today. I'll also be working with the mini grid stencil, which is a 1-layer stencil. So there's only one stencil with this one. And when you ink this up, you get this grid, which you see here. I'm also going to be working with the Spring Foliage die set, which has all of these flowers. You can build them together to make a beautiful bouquet. And I'm going to be using the Celebration Scripts stamp set. It does have a matching die set, and there are several sentiments that can be used for anniversary, graduation, baby shower, retirement, congratulations, wedding. And you can combine the larger sentiments with the smaller ones on the right side. So you can say, it's a baby, congratulations grad, congratulations to you, happy anniversary, and so on and so forth. And the coordinating dies are available, so if you wanted to die cut those larger sentiments, you can get the coordinating dies to do that. I will have links to all of these products down in the description box below, so if you're interested, take a look on down there. So I'm going to make a card using 2 stencils. I'm going to stencil these up and show you what they look like, and I'm also going to be showing you how to add color to white flower die cuts. So I want to start out with the Layered Spring Flowers stencil. So I'm starting with stencil A. These 3 stencils that are in this pack are lettered A, B, and C. So A is the first stencil that you want to use. And I'm inking it up with the Kitsch Flamingo Distress Oxide ink. So I'm laying down some pink ink to color all of these flowers. So here's my base layer. Once you color the whole thing up, if you want the ink a little bit darker, you can always go over it a second time with the magnet still in place. I am using my Make Art Station to hold that stencil down, so it does come with those magnets, so that board is magnetic, and it's so easy to hold those stencils down with the magnets. Okay, so here's my layer 2, and for layer 2 I'm using the dried Marigold Distress Oxide ink. So I just lined up the second stencil with the background of the first one, and then I'm just inking it up with the dried Marigold. I love the orange and the pink colors together. I think they're so pretty. So now I'm going to remove the stencil, and I'm going to come in with my layer C, this is the 3rd stencil, and line up those dots in the center of the flowers. And I'm going to color this up with the Scattered Straw Distress Oxide ink. So my flowers are going to have a yellow center. And by the way, the paper that I'm using is the Bristol Smooth cardstock, and this piece is cut down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So moving on, I am going to be using the mini grid stencil. And for this panel, I cut down a piece of cardstock to 4 1/4, but it's slightly less than 5 1/2 inches because I will not be needing the full 5 1/2 inches for this panel. And I'm using the Distress Oxide Tumbled Glass ink to ink up that panel. I wanted a very light blue ink on that to have a very subtle background. So you can see how light that is. Of course, if you wanted to go darker, you can always do that. So here is the Spring Foliage die set. And as you can see, all of the flower and leaf dies are all connected, and you can use your wire cutters to cut them apart. But I chose to leave them all connected, and I'm going to just use some white cardstock to die cut this whole panel. So in the past, when I've worked with dies like these, I've usually just snip them apart and then die cut them with different color cardstock and then glue the pieces together. But this time I thought I want to just keep these dies together. I don't want to snip them apart, and I'm going to just die cut them out of white cardstock and add ink to them. I think it will be easiest to do this way and be a time saver as well. So you can see that most of those die cuts stayed in the cardstock. So what I'm doing is I am just putting another cutting plate on top of that die cut piece and flipping it over. Now I'm looking at the back side of the die cuts. I'm just going to pop in the ones that did come out, and then I'm going to use the scrapbook.com 4-inch mint tape, and I'm just going to tape the back. This will hold those die cuts in place. Then I'm going to remove that from my cutting mat, and now I have a piece that all of the die cuts are still in place, and I can go ahead and do some ink blending. So this makes it so easy to do the ink blending. So I'm just picking several inks from my stash. Obviously I want green for the leaves. I have 2 different color green inks here. This first ink is the Shabby Shutters. It's my lightest green, and I'm just going over all of the leaves with the Shabby Shutters. Notice I'm also using a very small ink blending tool on the tip of my finger because I don't want one that's too large, because then it will possibly add ink to the flowers and the leaves that are next to the one that I'm currently inking. So here I'm just taking a very detailed ink blending tool. This tip is even smaller than the one that I previously used, and I'm just putting it in that Mowed Lawn ink. It's a little bit darker green, and I'm just putting that detailed ink on the edges and centers of those leaves because I want to have some contrasting colors and I want to add some detail to make it look like these leaves have some dimension and just a lots of detail. Of course, you can just use one color ink if you choose to, but if you use one color, you won't have all of the detail and definition that you do when you use multicolor inks. So it's kind of, think of it the same way as when you color with Copic markers or any alcohol type marker. The purpose of that is blending and adding shadows and details. It's the same thing with ink. So just use a lighter color and then add a darker color for some shadows. Next, I'm going to move on to some pinks. I have Spun Sugar and Kitsch Flamingo. And I went ahead and added the Spun Sugar to the flowers that you see there. For some reason my camera wasn't on, but that's what I did with those flowers. And now I'm just adding some of the darker pink. This is the Kitsch Flamingo, just to add some shadows and some darker color to those flowers. Again, using my detailed ink blending tool. So now I'm going to move on to blue, and for the blues I'm using Tumbled Glass as my light, so I cover the entire flower with the Tumbled Glass. And then I'm going to come in with the Salty Ocean, which is my darker blue, and I'm just going to put a little dab in the center, and then I'm going to use the side of the ink blending tool just to spread that ink out. And for this particular flower I'm going to put a dab right in the bottom center, and then just spread that ink upward from the bottom of the flower to reach those petals. So here a dab in the center, and then just spread that out, and I'm just going to repeat the process. My next set of colors is the dried Marigold, so that is a very light, like a peachy or a very light orange. I'm going to cover up all of my flowers there with the dried Marigold as my base color, and then I'm going to come in with Carved Pumpkin, which is the darker orange color, and I'm going to do the same process. So a dab in the center and then just spread it out with the sides of the detailed blending tool. Okay, so here is the scattered straw and the squeezed lemonade. So I do go over all of those flowers that you see there with the squeezed lemonade, and then I will come in and add the scattered straw, which is a little bit darker ink. So this is a very quick way of adding ink to white die cuts. It's also helpful if you don't have all of the cardstock colors that you need for your die cuts. You can just pull out your inks and you can color them up with your inks. Next, I'm just going to take a white gel pen and just add some accents to all of these flowers and leaves. Next, I'll go ahead and just pop all of those die cuts out, and then I can start putting these flowers together. So I'm just going to glue the centers on. There are lots of different the circle shapes for the centers. There's like small, medium, and large circles. So just find the flower that those correspond to and add them to the centers. Okay, so now I'm ready to start putting my card together. I'm going to take the flower panel and cut it down to 1 3/4 inches on the long side. So that panel is going to measure 4 1/4 by 1 3/4. And I'm going to just use the top portion, the smaller portion, and I'm going to add it to a piece of white cardstock that measures 4¼ by 5½. And then I'm going to put the grid portion on the bottom. And that is just going to go flush to the edge of the flower portion, and I'm going to press that down. I am going to snip off the excess here shortly, but in the meantime I did cut down a piece of white cardstock to 1/4 inches by 4¼ inches. I'm just adding some of the Kitsch Flamingo Distress Oxide ink to that cardstock. So that strip is going to go over top of where the two patterns meet. So I will just add that right over top of that line where they meet, and I'm going to snip that off. So again, the size of that ends up being 4¼ by 1/4 inches. So here's where I'm going to snip off the bottom of the grid panel as well. And now I have my card panel. So I'm going to go ahead and add a sentiment before I arrange these flowers. And the sentiment that I'm using is "It's Your Special Day." And I'm going to line that up there at the bottom right hand corner of my card panel and just ink it up with some black ink and stamp it down. Now I'm ready to arrange all of my flowers, and I'm going to arrange them in the top left hand corner so that the focal point is in the top left over top of that divider line. So I'm just arranging the leaves in the background, and then I'm going to arrange the flowers on top. And once I have that bouquet of flowers exactly where I want them to go, then I'll go ahead and add glue and adhere them down to my card front. I always like to glue from the bottom to the top, so I always add glue to the leaves that are flush against the card. Add that glue there first, and then once those leaves are attached, I can then add the flowers. Now I'm also going to snip off some of these stems so that it's not so bulky when I add the flowers on top. So you can see how that pink flower will fit right in the middle there. And if I keep all of those stems layered on top, it'll be hard to adhere that flower. So snipping off those stems, it definitely is helpful when adding more dimension on top, more flowers on top. So again, just arranging all of these flowers, and then I'll add them down, just gluing each one individually and adding it to fill in the rest of the empty spaces there in the bouquet. Next, I'm going to add that panel to an A2 size card base. So my A2 size card base measures 4¼ by 5½. It's just a white card base. And then I decide that I'm going to go ahead and bring in the Sunshine Pearls from Pretty Pink Posh, and I'm going to add 3 to the center of 3 of the flowers. So even though I did glue down the center circle die cut pieces to complete those flowers, I thought by adding these embellishments it would just add some more dimension and fun to the front of this card. So that completes my card today. Again, all product links will be down in the description box of this video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and be sure to click that subscribe button and turn on your bell notifications so that you don't miss any videos from me. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.